Today we have a very special guest, a world-renowned guest, and indeed a public treasure, Mr. Jim Fowler.
Thank you.
Jim Fowler, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today and talk a little bit to us about your life and your adventures.
Oh yeah, well, you know, I've luckily had the opportunity to do the Today Show and a lot of those shows, and
Seen you on Johnny Carson many times.
Johnny Carson, and of course, Wild Kingdom. I did that for about 30 years.
Yeah, with Marlon Perkins and
Marlon Perkins, yeah. Johnny Carson did a takeoff on our program once, and he called it. He called Marlon Perkins Merlin Pumpkin, and I was Jim Fowler. And
what was that quote that Johnny Carson said? That you were the only one crazy enough to work for Marlon Perkins?
There you go. Well, what happened was, I was the only one crazy enough to do what Marlon Perkins said to do.
Right.
And that's because, you know, I had worked with wildlife in my early life a lot down here. This was the farm in Georgia, and I grew up here, and so I knew a lot about running through the swamp and catching snakes. And
because we're here in Albany, Georgia, which is your home.
That's right, Albany, Georgia. And we're out on, I'm on Mud Creek Road. This is Mud Creek Plantation.
Right.
My father came here actually in 1920, and he was a soil scientist.
Right.
He'd got a degree from Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana. I went there also. And he was down here doing soils work and studies, and he bought this plantation for $2 an acre in 1920.
Wow, yeah. How many acres do you have here?
Oh well, we don't have a whole lot. I think we've got about 800 acres.
Well, that's a significant amount.
Yeah, but these plantations, the plantations that you see around us, those are quail hunting plantations, and some of those are 10,000 acres.
Right.
They're big.
Now, I mean, everybody that's familiar with you or familiar with your adventures, and I know people ask you a lot of the same stories about what's the most dangerous animal, what's the biggest adventure. But what I want to do is really kind of tell people stuff that you don't commonly get asked, and which is, you're a zoologist.
Yep.
And at what age did you decide on that being a profession?
Yeah.
And what kind of inspired you into zoology?
Well, you know, you're asking the right questions because actually when I was in the 4th grade, I wrote a paper on birds of prey and falconry.
Right.
Up in Falls Church, Virginia.
Right.
And
which is where you grew up. You were born here, but you grew up.
I was born here, but my father was sent to Washington, actually to Maryland. And so I lived up there for a while, but I had an instinct apparently. You know, the thing that's could be interesting is that in the Middle Ages, Fowler was a name, and the symbol of the Fowler family was holding a hawk on the fist.
Ah,
Isn't that something?
And Fowler is what origin? Is it English?
It's English-German.
English-German.
And there's a quote in the Bible, I believe it is, that says, "Beware of the snare of the fowler." But anyway, I must have had something going for me because that symbol of the hawk on the fist, that's what I've been doing all my life. And yesterday down here, we had about 20 different birds of prey, falconers. There's a pretty good group of falconers around. They have a club. and we were flying peregrine falcons around the open fields here,
Right.
coming to a lure at about 100 miles an hour. So, and I got hooked on that when I was quite young. And I remember I had a bird of prey in high school that I trained. And
so that was kind of the genesis of
Yeah.
you branching into
That's
being
right.
an interest in zoology?
Well, in life, if you have an interest, good solid interest that way,
Right.
preferably you got one that'll bring in some money. I didn't do very good in that area.
Really?
But I went to, you know what? It is true that nobody told me what I couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I first went to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I was working in Florida at an attraction, a birds of prey attraction near Orlando. It's after I got out of college.
Right.
And a guy came through there and he wanted to do a documentary film in Africa. And apparently he and some of his buddies had been over there hunting the year before, no, 4 years before that.
Right.
But he wanted to go back with a camera. And halfway over on the ship, it takes 28 days to go from New York to Cape Town,
Yeah.
South Africa. And what he did was he told me what he wanted me to do was live trap lions. And he wanted to be the first white hunter film shooting an unwounded lion in a full charge at him.
Wow.
And so I got involved in a lot of stuff. I wouldn't live trap a lion again. It's a good way to get killed.
Yeah.
And this guy, I finally, I believe that this lion charge was filmed in the back of Life magazine. There's a picture of it in a full charge.
Was it?
Yeah, I saw that Life magazine a little while ago. 1964 was the year. But anyway, I don't want to do that too often because a lion in a full charge can come, he's only about 3 feet off the ground, and the stride's about 13 feet. And luckily, I insisted on digging a hole in the ground for this guy to jump down in case he missed the lion.
So he could protect himself.
Yeah, and I'm glad it didn't happen because when he jumped down the hole, he missed the lion. The sand fell in the rifle. If he had pulled the trigger, if the lion had stayed there,
The gun would have blown
probably
up.
blown himself up. But anyway, I got involved in some pretty crazy stuff.
You haven't really, you weren't born with an innate sense of fear, apparently.
I'm a scientist, and I've always said that fear is a lack of knowledge.
It's true.
Isn't that
Just
true?
like people's fear of snakes or fear of others.
Yeah, that's right. Well, there are some primitive instincts like snakes. I don't know if I told you, but if I take a snake to a school, I had a big anaconda that was like 18 feet long. And the kids the classroom would come up and hold it and measure it. It's always fun to do that, and they'll stand there with that snake in their arms. The minute I put that snake on the floor, it goes like that. I mean, those kids are out. They run out of the school.
Right.
With fear.
But they were holding it with no fear.
No fear when they're holding it, but the sight, we humans are programmed genetically, I think.
Yeah.
If something's like that on the ground, it affects us. So, but I've learned a lot I've lectured with animals an awful lot around the country, and
Now, I mean, you grew up and you
Yeah.
had an interest in animals, interest in science. Now, having worked with them for over 40 years, over 4 decades of extensively working with a larger amount of animals than anyone else really, how has your view changed today as opposed to what you thought
Yeah.
animals were like when you first started?
A good question. I think I found out. First of all, we're destroying the habitat, and the population of wildlife really depends on the existence of the natural world. And we humans have got to be careful, because I think we pretty well denuded up to 50% of our country
Right.
with open fields, and it's important, very important to have wildlife around, including predators.
Right.
You know, the predators take off the weak, the sick, and the stupid out of the population so it doesn't breed.
Right.
So every species of animal, and actually bird also, their life is beginning to improve every generation, because the weak, sick, and stupid are taken out of the population.
That's sort of like Darwin's theory of natural selection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the question is, do humans operate that way?
Right.
I know the automobile
I-
accidents on the highways,
I don't think that the
some
humans
of
act
them
that
get
way.
rid of some of the stupid people very quick.
Yeah.
But no, you know what? This planet, I've thought a lot about this. Life on this planet is pretty rough. Animals are fighting, killing, and eating each other. And humans haven't learned yet not to kill each other
Right.
in war over wanting to possess something that everybody else has, but they don't have it. So
Right.
they're trying to get what they don't have. And you know, I hate to tell you, but television makes the whole situation worse, because somebody in a remote part of the world can watch television and see what everybody else has.
That's true.
And then they want to get
They
it.
get envious and jealous.
Oh yeah, man, it's amazing.
Where they would have been perfectly happy not knowing.
Exactly. I lived with the Kalahari Bushmen. They don't even know we exist.
Really?
Oh yeah, and I had a great time learning some of their language, but there are still a few primitive Bushmen in Africa. But I don't want to get off the subject, but the Bushmen have a Mongolian-like eye. It slants up a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so their roots go way back.
It's obvious to see in the last 40 years how man has raped and pillaged the earth, the very environment that he lives in. And that's why conservation is such an important thing. However, it's anymore, I feel, that when you use the word conservation, people are misinterpreting that word.
Oh, absolutely. And listen, one of the things I talk about, you hit the nail on the head. Conservation is a management term, but it's not a communication term.
Right.
So guess what the term is we ought to use?
What's that?
And it's the key to how everything on this planet operates. It's called sustainable consumption.
Right.
Everything here, from a mouse to an elephant, is a consumer.
True.
And they're not going to be here if they don't consume on a sustainable basis. So I talk a lot about sustainable consumption instead of conservation. Conservation is a throwaway term.
Yeah, I've often thought that. I mean, I was an adamant supporter of it when I first heard it, but then there again, I was raised on a 1,200-acre dairy farm, and so I was a little bit more, to the roots than most people were, and I understood because we had soil conservation, and the extension agent, you have to work with him, and this was just an extension thereof.
Yeah.
And you can see how one small thing that humans do can affect a whole population of animals and an area. whether it be cutting a wrong tree down and disturbing a beaver colony.
Yeah, sure.
And
Well,
it's just
my father, you said the right word. My father was majored in soil conservation.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked for the USDA,
Mm-hmm.
and he went around mainly the eastern United States, mapping different kinds of soils.
Very important
I
job.
mean, this is like 1920. He started. He came back from the war, and then was employed by the government. And just a little side note, they gave him a mustered out Army ambulance to drive from Indiana
Really?
to Georgia. Guess how many days it took?
I don't know.
18 days.
18 days.
There were no paved roads, and he had these little African kids who would help take it across on a barge across a creek.
Right.
But you think we're hippies today? Woo! My father came down here and bought this plantation for $2 an acre in 1920. Yeah.
But then again, that was quite a bit, because I remember my father saying we paid $4 and a half, $5 an acre for what we had.
Where was your dairy farm?
In Newnan, Georgia.
Oh, in Georgia.
Yeah, Newnan, yeah.
That's pretty unusual to have. I'm sure they had plenty of big dairy farms, but
Cayuga County, when I was growing up, used to have 7. Now it doesn't have 1. all you see now is tarmac and pavement and asphalt everywhere.
well, we got to be careful, because if we pave over more than half of the continent, well, I mean, we're in big trouble.
And see, the thing that irks me a lot, and you'll appreciate this, is people, honestly, the people of this generation don't have a concept of where food comes from. And when I mean that, I mean from the farm to the fork and every step in between.
Yep.
They can't quite grasp that concept.
No, they're
and that is dangerous concept.
I think it's even more dangerous to not have a concept of what I call how the earth works.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any other place to go to, I don't think.
No.
I think we better start taking care of our planet.
Right.
I don't think there are that many people who are thinking about it in that way.
No, even
they're beginning to catch on that we better take care of where we're living. But we're not. I don't think we're going to be able to take a spaceship and go go live somewhere else. We better take what we got here.
No.
Now, this forest on this plantation out here is one of the only natural forests, I think, in Georgia. Most forests are either cleared for quail hunting or whatever, but we have out here, we got nature.
Now, is there any natural lakes in Georgia?
Natural what?
Lakes.
Oh, yeah, there are lakes around, but...
I mean, that weren't man-made, because...
Oh, yeah, you see, here's the way... This part of Georgia and over in Alabama have what you call karst topography.
Okay.
So there's limestone underneath us. And that limestone spreads, like I say, from southern Alabama up here. And it actually enriches the soil. But out here, if you'll notice, it drops off. That's a sinkhole, we call it. And obviously the limestone underneath has been dissolving. So that's been falling down a bit. But you will see natural ponds in Georgia that are sinkholes. Now some of them only fill up when it have heavy rain. We used to have water that you could see down in that drop off there in the early spring when you had a lot of rain.
Right.
That would get pretty good deep water down there.
Mhm.
Right now, there are big pine trees as big as you can get your arms around that are growing down there. And you may know that we had a big wind here.
Oh yeah, a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Thank goodness those big pine trees survived. A lot of the other ones obviously were blown over.
I mean, that's the first storm I've ever known that actually pick up and move trains. Down in Moultrie, I saw that when we went down to, because we covered the that Sunbelt Ag
Really?
Expo, and there was some massive, disasters down there.
Well, I can imagine so, because the closer you were to the Gulf of Mexico, it's off the subject, but I have designed what's called a hurricane house.
Yeah?
They're not going to rebuild those frame houses down there, I don't think.
No.
They got property, but I call it a hamburger house.
Okay.
It's got the same curve or flatness on top as it does underneath.
Uh-huh.
When you have a peaked roof like this and the air goes over it, it lifts the roof off.
Right.
It's like an airplane wing.
True.
But so anyway, I don't think I will find an architect. I know some of the world's best architects, but we're going to have to change our lives to the point where we do things that are biologically sensible,
Right.
rather than based on some historic-looking house.
True.
Yeah.
In saying that, what do you think, if there was just one thing that people could do to make the greatest impact at, conservation, what do you think it could be?
All right. First of all, we need to obviously talk about it. We don't really take this, how we treat the earth, I don't think we still take it too seriously. There is a bright spot in there. There are people, E.O. Wilson and other ones that are, but E.O. Wilson, who's a great biologist, he could tell you the little details, how grass grows, etc., but he doesn't necessarily get out before the public with telling them what they got to do to keep a healthy world.
But there should be a public representative that speaks very copiously on sustainable consumption, as you call it.
Absolutely.
There needs to be somebody out there who campaigns for this, because it's going to be a catastrophic disaster in a very few years, the way things are going now, if we don't do something.
Well, if you're a smart species, you'll plan for the future. But there is a guy, I unfortunately can't think of his name right now. He's a scientist, and but he was sort of looked down on by some of the other scientists, because in the scientific world you got to have 13 or 14 years of approval before you can open your mouth.
Right.
Know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and some of the best scientists never get listened to.
There you go. And or else they don't know how to reach the public.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I think the big challenge is first we've got to manage the earth a little bit better. I think when the settlers first arrived, a squirrel could go from the East Coast to somewhere in the Midwest around Chicago without touching the ground. We got to realize that this area was forested, and there are lots of results from that. There weren't as many deer in those days as there are now, because now you got sunlight penetrating open areas and edge effect around there. They can get a lot to eat. But we got to start understanding, I think that's what the public is missing. We do not, in my opinion, have spokespeople for the natural world that know how to get out and affect the attitudes of the public. Now,
Right.
you know, you can still, I know contractors, when they want to build a house, they'll cut every tree down and then try to replant some little ones.
Oh gosh.
You know,
Yeah, I know.
we're good at that.
You
but
see that all the time.
there's some areas of the country that are pretty well denuded, and I think we have to be careful. We have to replant. There's no question about that. But you can never do as good job replanting as nature does it.
Oh, never.
Yeah.
Never. And as far as animals go, as well as various plants, what have you seen in the last 40 years as far as the rate of extinction of different species?
It's horrifying, the rate of extinction. I think there are like 100 endangered species that we've lost. But we're so busy. Well, first of all, television has us by the ear, leading us around. And we're being programmed by television much more than anybody ever thought.
That's true, but you're on television now.
Yeah.
So let's help program the people watching this show.
You got it. Well, you know what you have to do? I talk a lot about this. We don't have public speakers who can talk about what's in it for us. If you say you want to do something with a forest or a field or whatever, a human being is so programmed that you've got to learn how to answer the question, what's in it for us?
True, because
Why?
that's everybody's natural inclination.
Yeah.
Is if I've got to give something, I want something in return. So what's in
You
it for
got
me?
it.
Yeah.
But we humans are very oriented toward
Greed.
benefiting.
Greed.
Greed. It's greed.
Yeah.
But it's not visible greed. It's greed, but some of the people don't know that it's greed.
Right.
But what we got to do is to, I think we have to develop spokespeople for the natural world in colleges. And I had a student the other day that asked me what he should learn in college.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, communication. What's missing is the ability to communicate to a group of people, to the world.
Right.
And we need to do that. I'm still trying to think of the name of the scientist who was talking a lot about science, but I think he lost his audience. Some of the other scientists said he didn't know what he was talking about.
Well, what country on earth is doing the best job right now?
Well, let's think back a little bit on that, because
Okay.
I have thought about that. I've been to Europe, but let me tell you something. A lot of the forests in a populated area like that are created by humans, and they're more or less pruned. And, you can walk through a forest over there, and it's man-made. It's not necessarily a natural area.
Right.
Right out that window is a natural area, and that's got a huge diversity in the plants and the animals that live around here. My father knew all about that. But in Europe, some of those ancient settlements, towns, everything is pretty well pruned.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now, I'm not saying it's not healthy to do that. It is, but
I mean, you do disturb and augment some of the smaller species, the insects and stuff,
yeah.
even by the pruning. So you do affect, the ecosystem.
Well, the whole system is phenomenal, because one thing depends on the other for survival. Even some of these little rats, field rats.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bird of prey that lives on that. And the bird of prey is pretty good to have around because they eliminate the weak, the sick, and the stupid.
Right.
The predators are important, and I thank goodness I've been hearing about a wolf population. They've introduced wolves now from Canada down into the northern United States, and there are a lot of people that don't want wolves around, don't understand. But the wolves are keeping the elk population healthy.
Right.
Yeah, the way it's amazing the way it's all intertwined with survival.
Right.
And we shouldn't be the ones that judge what we do with the planet.
Well, people, all my life in schools and colleges, I've always been told that humans were the top animal.
Yeah.
And I really don't believe. I mean, because it's so destructive, it does things that doesn't balance the ecosystem for various reasons whatsoever.
Yeah.
And our instincts have been bred out of us. Our natural instincts and inclinations have been just watered down over the generations to where we don't have, the wherewithal to survive like we once did.
Right.
Therefore, that's causing us to do the harm we're doing to the environment now.
Well, yeah, and we're consumers. If we're consuming, we got to consume on a basis that survives.
Not a gluttonous consumption.
You got it.
Because that's what we're on now, is just
sustainable. I think the word sustainable is something we ought to talk about a lot more. I try to get out to the public myself. Luckily, somebody said I didn't know what I couldn't do.
Well, I love your term sustainable consumption, because you have programs for what they call sustainable agriculture.
Yeah.
However, agriculture just doesn't cover everything that needs to.
Exactly. Yeah. We are definitely consumers, and everything is a consumer from, like I said, from a mouse to an elephant. Now, all you got to do is study elephants a little bit. I've been with elephants in the wild. And man, if they can't migrate south looking for water and stop eating their environment, it's going to be eaten up. There's a place in Africa where it's nice because they're digging water holes, keeping water in the holes. Well, because it's nice for tourism.
All right.
You can see something and you can pay. Money comes in.
Right.
But the problem is that elephant normally in the dry season would migrate where the water is further south and relieve the pressure on the forest around that water hole that was man-made. And but those things are, I don't know if you've ever been to Africa, but the elephants have consumed a lot of the vegetation.
Yeah, I've been to Botswana before.
Well, yeah, that's the best place to go.
Yeah, and I like South Africa a lot, around Durban, that KwaZulu-Natal area.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've been there a lot, and in fact, when I told you I went away over there on a freighter. First time, it took 28 days. And I met a family in Cape Town up on the hills surrounding it. The town was Somerset West. And I met an artist up there, Heine von Michaelis, who was actually training birds of prey. That's why I heard about him. And his son is a geologist that's now over here. He called me from Arizona a little while ago. But anyway, the point is I got very close to that family in Cape Town. And Then I went on up to Africa where I was trapping lions.
Yeah.
Told you about that, and
Right.
that's a good way to get killed.
Did you ever make the little jaunt across from Cape Town to Antarctica?
Never did that, but I have been in Antarctica.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went down on a ship, and we went down. It wasn't all that cold because we were in the right time of year.
Mm-hmm.
But now that's a real challenge, Antarctic. If we mess around and warm up the oceans, boy, we better know what the heck we're doing.
Yeah, that's going to be
Isn't that something?
the end, isn't it?
Yeah. So all I'm saying is that we were lucky enough. Who knows how in the world we developed and have an awareness of where we are.
Mm-hmm.
We're probably the only living organism on the planet that can do that. How we got here, a lot of people think that this whole earth was a big rock for millions of years. There was no life. And the big question is, how did life get here?
Right.
Well, apparently the first living things that got here were snails and mollusks in the ocean, and they sort of went on from there. So
nobody really knows anything.
Nobody knows, but that's what they think. And then life came from the ocean up to the land. You gotta believe a little bit in evolution if you believe this.
Mm-hmm.
Something happened where we changed, and we know that.
Yeah, there's a difference though between microevolution and macroevolution,
Yeah.
and people keep wanting to lump it all into just the blanket term evolution.
Yeah.
And
Well, listen, I have been in the cliffs of the west in Montana, some of those countries out there, and I've actually looked
mm-hmm.
at a dinosaur track in the rock
Mm-hmm.
going up a mountain.
Up a mountain, right?
And there was a little dinosaur with it. So you can't tell me there weren't dinosaurs around.
Right.
And
Yeah. The only thing I've always had a problem buying into was what they call fossil fuels, because I just don't see that the oil and stuff we get out of the ground is dead dinosaurs or stuff like that. I mean, it has to be the earth's blood or some sustainable thing.
Yeah.
And I think, draining it out of the earth like we do might not necessarily be the best thing. I mean, that's just, we all have our own personal things, and we have a hard time reconciling in our head. And I just never bought into the fact that oil was fossil fuels.
Well, let me mention this. There's a limit to how much oil we can suck out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I drove down from Connecticut, and the highway and the traffic and the automobiles are suffocating this planet.
Right.
And they all need oil and gas.
Right.
So electricity, but there's going to have to be something that makes electricity. So there'll still be some. We have to start. It's all about sustainability.
I love the idea of harvesting solar power, if we could.
Well, the point is, I don't think we humans, we have a history of being able to exploit anything we want to. Mm-hmm. And we're not, if you go around talking about limiting our exploitation, nobody's going to listen to you. They don't want to listen to you.
You're right.
But let me tell you something. I do not see speakers in our country talking to the public about how the earth works. There's not enough communication, and that's why your program is important. We got an ocean there, and then how it works, everything, a lot of stuff depends on the ocean, as you know, and so we need better communication, and we got to figure out how to do that.
Right. Right. Well, what do you think your greatest achievement has been in your career?
Well, I have a couple of them right here said that I was the one that influenced their life.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do better.
Even
than that.
the gentleman that come with us today that's on audio, he said that you were very much a strong influence on his life.
Yeah.
And I remember vividly, anxiously looking forward to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And
there you go.
watching you and Marlon Perkins.
Yeah.
Because it was a different type of show than anything at the time.
Yeah.
And
I've done other programs, but
oh yeah.
Johnny Carson, I always tried to get information. By the way, there's a real difference between I work a lot with wildlife parks,
Mm-hmm.
and I know the zoo world quite well.
Mm-hmm.
And the zoo world call themselves educational, but what they're really doing is giving out information.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big difference. Information, information is when you sit on a hot stove, comes right up through your backside.
Uh-huh.
Education is when you learn not to sit on a hot stove. Education has to affect your life. Information doesn't necessarily affect your life. And that's a good distinction, I think, to make, that education has to be something that affects your life. Yeah.
Right.
So I hope that I can keep that in mind when I give a talk or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see you and have always seen you is you're a very consummate educator and supporter of nature, which brings me to a term that people that I've confronted for years. Nobody understands the true definition of the word naturalist.
Yeah.
If someone calls themselves a naturalist,
That's right. That's right.
that's a very misinterpreted word.
Yeah.
Well, but anyway, that's how I see your career from my eyes, is a consummate educator and an ardent naturalist.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But, the other thing is, I've never heard any of the people that talk about the natural world or the world around us, they don't hit the nail on the head, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is natural world important to humans? Okay. Number one, I hate to admit it, but it's economics. There's an awful lot of money going into people that visit national parks,
Right.
etc. And economics are usually the number one justification. Number two, I call the quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, quality of life, you can, nowadays people in the world can look at television and see what everybody else has.
Right.
But when you have food, shelter, all the biological things you need, you don't need to go out and kill somebody. And guess what the third one is?
What's that?
The third one is taking care of the earth, how we sustain ourselves on the planet. But anyway, I haven't thought of some of those things for a while. I'm glad you got my mind twisted that way.
So, I mean, You've had a very long and successful and quite illustrious career. You'll have to admit that. You've done things that nobody else on earth, most everybody else, has never been able to do.
That's right.
And you've enjoyed yourself.
Yep.
And I guess, what would you like your legacy to be? What would you like to leave?
I would think, well, there's several things that probably, one of the things would be my influence on the public about the natural world and why it's important to humans. And by the way, the third thing that I wanted to talk about earlier, I forgot it.
Okay.
The third justification for having a natural world is that when you destroy your natural resources, it creates violence. And it's happening right now in the Middle East. That used to be an oasis, but it's been trampled by humans. And now, they're fighting each other to get what they don't have. So somebody on this planet should be a spokesperson for the natural world. And I'll tell you what they should say.
What's that?
They should say, hey, folks, we got to stop fighting each other. We're all on the same circular object moving around the sun. We got to get along together. We got to stop fighting. I've never heard anybody talk about that enough.
No.
We got to stop killing each other.
Yeah, people try to have peace protests, but that's a contradiction in terms right there.
Yeah, you got it.
But I mean, you do have to. Once you realize that you're all here with the same goal in mind and the same resources at hand, more or less, then you could truly pull together, and if you unite, you can make this a glorious place more than it ever has been in the past.
Sustainable. Oh, I just remembered there are, I mentioned the three things, but excuse me, that we got, I think the three things that are very, very important. We have to learn how the earth works. And we also have to create a quality of life. And, you can define that different ways. We have to create a quality of life for everybody on the planet. If we don't, they're going to be fighting and killing each other.
True.
If you don't have a banana to eat.
But I don't know what it's going to take for that one push to start educating people in schools, because this stuff needs to start in grammar school.
It does.
In grammar school and go on. I mean, they thrust other things down your throat and force you to learn it. This should be something. It's a very important and poignant thing that should be taught from an early age.
Absolutely, but here the point I'm saying is, have you ever heard anybody talking about the three things that are really important to humanity?
No.
Let me tell you, humanity is the mission of humanity. I've never heard anybody talk about the mission of humanity. Right. But guess what it is, in my opinion?
Okay.
Mission of humanity, number one, is to find out who, what, why, and where we are.
Right.
Right. And number two is to create a quality of life for all people on the planet so we don't fight and kill each other.
And don't exhaust our resources.
Yeah, exactly. And the resources, sustainable resources, are the third, yeah. But I don't hear people, scientists, talking about that to the public.
No.
We need to talk about that to the public.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to write all that. I'm trying to write a book, about my life, and I'll have to get involved with some of that.
How far in are you in writing the book?
Oh, I've done a lot of thinking about it. It's not that easy to get a publisher. There is a publisher that wants me to do children books with them. But
That's like me. I think about contemplating a lot of stuff.
yeah,
You know.
it's a good way to put it.
No, but I mean, I think it'd be a wonderful thing if you were to put
Yeah.
pen to paper and come up with a.
Yeah, I'm
a book.
gonna do it. It just takes a little bit.
I got to ask you, are you still with Mutual of Omaha Insurance?
Never, they wouldn't insure me.
No.
I'm not kidding.
Really?
I think they thought I was too much of a risk.
Wow.
Well, they did support me for many years.
I know they did support you, but they never would insure you.
Yeah,
Wow.
they wouldn't insure me. Yeah. Nowadays, I don't think most of them even know who I am. I was thinking about,
Really?
well, they've got different administrations now and all that. I'm sure they know who I am, but yeah, I think Mutual Omaha did a lot to allow me and a couple other people to get out to the public.
Look, we would be further behind today if it wasn't for you and Marlon Perkins.
I think
I mean,
appreciate you saying that.
It is.
Yeah.
We would be further behind as a species
Yeah.
if it weren't for you two discovering the things you did, doing the things you do, and in your own way, to the best of your abilities, educating people.
Yeah.
And who watched most of those shows? It was the younger people.
That's
The older
right.
people did too,
Right.
but the younger people,
Yeah.
like I was at the time, that's the ones that you leave the impression on. You know, and you did that.
I had a bunch of people here yesterday. Some of them with birds of prey that were showing off, and a lot of them said that I was the one that got them interested. Knew it was possible.
Yeah, I
And,
saw a lot of short interviews with you and you
Yeah.
on Carson and various
Right.
people, and when people talk to you, they're always asking you about animal stories and all that,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to do that because those are fun and those are interesting.
That's right.
But there's a lot more important things that goes behind the entertainment aspect of it.
Well, entertainment will capture the attention,
Right.
but I always have tried to have a solid thing to talk about. Johnny Carson was more interested in the entertainment than in the facts, but he finally got tuned in. I took Johnny and his wife and his two sons to Africa
Did you?
on a trip. Yeah,
So he finally.
he finally
Got
started thinking and learning a little bit about all that. He goes straight out of Nebraska and pretty much of what I call an artificial world. But
Nebraska,
Africa,
yeah.
he was so impressed with Africa. He didn't necessarily say it at the time, but he when he came back, he said Africa changed his life.
Oh.
Yeah, it would.
I can see that.
And we, one night, an elephant was trying to get some acacia berries or fruit. Standing on its back legs with his trunk up. They could reach almost as tall as a giraffe can reach. But he was doing that right over Johnny's tent. And I was scared to wake Johnny up. But anyway, finally the elephant went away. But Carson never knew that was happening, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Johnny Carson was very tuned in to
He
everything.
seemed like a very genuine individual.
Oh yeah, he was tuned into everything.
Yeah, he seemed very genuine.
Yeah, I told him later on an elephant almost stepped on his tent. Yeah.
And what did he say to that?
Yeah, he was.
Didn't really matter.
He actually organized another trip himself, and he took off. He took his friend who was on his show sometimes, head of the band, head of the orchestra.
Oh, Doc Severinsen.
He took Doc to Africa after that. Yeah, of a dog.
Yeah, Ed McMahon, he always seemed to be a character.
Once out in California, I was out there, and Ed had fallen in love with a young stewardess, flight attendant, and he left his wife, and so he told me I was in the same hotel. He said, "Jim, why don't, if you don't mind, bring a animal up to my room. I want to impress my wife, my new wife." And I knew a guy with a tame cheetah.
Right.
So I took the cheetah, tried to go up in the elevator, but everybody would scream and run off the elevator when I took the cheetah up. I finally got it up there. And so he wanted me just to let the cheetah be on the bed, let his wife pet it.
Right.
And we did all that, but unfortunately, he found his new wife with a fireman like a month later.
Oh, wow. Well,
So
that's what happens when you start.
The animal didn't work that well.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Well, those kind of relationships don't work that well either. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Mr. Fowler, is there anything, I mean, while you're here and you're going to be in front of millions of people, is there anything you would like to say?
Well, I would like to say that we can develop spokespeople. We need to do that in an urgent way, and people need to talk to each other about how the earth works and why it's important for us to do certain things to sustain it, sustainable consumption. And I think trying to get that message out is one of the things I've got to do a little better. I'm trying to write a book, if I can find a publisher. And
well, I wish you success with that. I hope you do get to write your book you want.
Yeah. So I'm going to do that, but I've had quite a history with the Explorers Club in New York.
Right.
My son now is on the board of the Explorers Club.
You used to be the honorary chairman, correct?
I used to be the honorary chairman.
Yeah.
And Mark, who's my son, and luckily he's educating himself. He was just over in North Africa and different countries helping to inform people about the importance of endangered species. He's leaving the day after Thanksgiving, in fact. He's going to come here today.
Yeah.
And Mark is carrying on some of that dialogue.
That's wonderful.
So I hope that'll work. But I'm glad you came down and made me start thinking about all this again. I got to make sure that I think it all out and get it on paper. I'm not losing, I think, my brain very, very quickly. But it does happen, you forget certain things. So I've got to get busy down here on writing my book is one of the things I have to do.
Well, I hope that I've sparked a little bit of encouragement.
Well, you've sparked me to rethink some things. I really have to get serious and explain some of my thoughts on paper. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Fowler.
like I say, I've been around the sun 88 times.
88 times. Your birthday is in April, correct?
In April, yeah, that's right.
So you'll
But I love coming down here because of the natural world that's surrounding us.
But this is your primary home?
This is where I was born.
Right.
We live in Connecticut,
Ah,
up north of New York City.
that's where your primary home is.
Yeah, and it's a town called Rowayton, south of Norwalk, and I can see the water from there. So,
You enjoy it in Connecticut then?
well, it's a if you want to meet people, then you can do it in New York. And I do a lot of talking and things like that. But my wife and my kids are up that way too. So I have a daughter with 2 children,
Right.
and she lives nearby.
That's good.
This is a little isolated down here from the reality of what's happening.
I know, but it's very, very refreshing and
It's
comforting.
very refreshing.
I love areas like this. I truly do.
Yeah, it's
I hope to
refreshing.
one day be able to live in areas like this.
I hope so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. I'm just so fortunate that the wind didn't blow over some of these trees out here. I'm lucky.
All right, Mr. Fowler.
All right.
Thank you very much. And
Thank
I wish
you,
you the
sir.
very best
And
of luck in your
I'd
book.
like to, I was able to say some things that I want to keep aware of.